I felt devalued. I felt like I was now in a position where I was going to have to justify my own existence, and that I would have to prove myself to the world that I shouldn't have been aborted and that I was worthy of living. I was adopted nearly from birth, and like many adoptees, for years I dreamed of being able to meet my birth mother. My search began on my 18th birthday, and I was shocked to have been told that I would never have the opportunity to meet her. And that was very difficult for me. I went ahead and I petitioned for what's called my non-identifying information. And when it arrived, it had everything you can imagine about my birth mother, except for her name. It had her eye color, hair color, height, weight, age, the age of my half-brother and half-sister, who were 11 and 13 when I was born. And I just hung on to every word. But for my biological father, all it said was that he was Caucasian and of large build. She couldn't even say his eye color, hair color, nothing. And I thought it over. What could the possible explanation be? I called up my caseworker and asked her, was my mom raped? And she said, yeah, I didn't want to tell you. And I was just devastated. I remember feeling so ugly and unwanted, thinking, who would ever love me? And I immediately thought of what people say in cases of rape, that they're either pro-life except or pro-choice, especially in cases of rape. And I immediately felt targeted by our society, by our world. And I called a local Right to Life office in my home state of Michigan because I just wanted to talk to someone who valued my life. And the woman on the other end of the phone spoke words of value into my life at a time when I was really hurting. And then I asked my adoptive parents, how do you feel about abortion, and what about in cases of rape? My adoptive father began to say to me, well, I've always felt like, who am I to say what a woman can or cannot do with her own body? I guess I'd have to say I've always been pro-choice. And I asked him, but Dad, you watched me grow up 18 years. You really mean to say that you really believe that her body, her choice was more important than my whole entire life? And it was like he instantly snapped out of it. And he said, no, I don't believe that. Wow, how would I ever get to a point where I would believe such a thing? And so I learned at a minimum at 18 that my story had the potential to change hearts and minds. When I was 19, I found out that my birth mother wanted to meet me. It was arranged for us to meet by phone. I received a letter with my birth name, which was Judy Ann Miracle, and it had her name and phone number. I called her up, and she told me that she was expecting my call. And she told me that she was sorry to hear that I already knew about the rape. But then she proceeded to fill me in on some horrific details. And it was truly a worst case scenario. She was very petite, and she was abducted at knife point by a serial rapist. That's how I was conceived. And that was so hard to hear for several reasons. It was difficult to know that I was conceived out of a truly worst case scenario, and to know that my biological father was a really bad man. We arranged for me to fly home and meet her on her 51st birth date, and she sent me photos and a letter where she said all kinds of wonderful things. She went on to say she didn't know how to express her inner feelings. And then she wrote, "It's so great, big, beautiful. It's always been my dream. I'm so happy. I'm crying. A love that ate at me for 19 years. My daughter at last. With love, your mom, Joanne." That was all my dreams come true. I felt so affirmed. I flew home and had a wonderful reunion weekend with her. When I went back to university, I went to a few meetings of Students for Life. I didn't get involved because I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere, but it gave me the courage and hope support I felt I needed to finally call my birth mother and ask her about abortion. In fact, she went to 2 illegal abortions and I was almost aborted. But the back alley conditions and the fact that it was illegal caused her to back out, as it did with most women. She was concerned for her own safety. I was devastated to hear her say that. That was my life that she was talking about. Now, decades later, my birth mother and I are both thankful that we were both spared the horror of abortion. When my grandmother died a few years ago, my birth mother called me on my birthday to wish me happy birthday and to tell me that my grandmother had passed away. My birth mother and I had both been to visit her just a few weeks before, and we had a long heart-to-heart conversation. And I told her, I will be there for you. I tell people that if your mother chose life for you, how nice for you. That must feel wonderful. But mine didn't. She really did choose abortion for me. But pro-life advocates, leaders, legislators, who, without even knowing of my exact existence, recognized that mine was a life worth saving. And they did so by making sure that abortion was illegal, even in cases of rape. I understand that people want to have compassion for rape victims, but people need to understand that it's not compassionate to offer women abortion. But more violence is not the answer to violence. We also hear people say that it's barbaric, but what's really barbaric is to punish an innocent human being for someone else's crime. I'm an attorney, and I actually decided to do a word search of my state's laws on unborn children. And what I found really interesting is that in the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court, whenever it was a case involving a wanted child, whether it was adoption or wrongful death of a child who was harmed, like if a woman was pregnant and there was a car accident from a drunk driver, or if there was a doctor who committed malpractice, anytime that was a wanted child, and it didn't matter the gestation of the unborn child, they used the term unborn child. Anytime the case involved abortion, same gestational age, they used the term fetus. Same court, same age of the child, but they changed the language. And the fact is, as in war, it's easier to kill the enemy when you dehumanize them, but it doesn't change the reality and the humanity of that child. One of the most common things that we hear from women who share stories like ours is that it gives them hope to know that they're not alone in this, and they do feel like they now have a voice. And that's my hope with our visit to Ireland, that more and more women will come forward and share their own stories.